you will dig deep and find a way forward, and you'll also perhaps pick up a few ideas from today's session. Just before I go ahead, Bongi, shall we record this? I'm guessing that maybe some people might want that, so I'm happy to do that if you like. Do you want me to put that on?
Yes, please. I think it has
already been put on. Okay, great. That's it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here's what I think I will do. I've put together a few ideas, which I will take you through in a moment. And I'm going to start by just sharing my screen to see if I can get my presentation up, just with a few kind of points to speak from. Okay, so I'm hoping you can all see. Can you tell me, can you see the screen so far? It just says, what is the best way to prepare for your exams?
Yes, I can.
You can see that. Okay, so I hope you can all see that. All right, so just before I start in on this, I guess I need to say the following. If you've come to this session looking for like a magic suggestion that you had never thought of before, and I'm sitting here with this solution which no one else knows about, and I'm about to give it to you, and I will then guarantee you 100% success. If you fail, I will give you your money back. So if you're coming with that kind of expectation, well, sorry, folks, it's not the way it works, as I'm sure you know. So I'm going to try and be quite realistic here and look for little things which might make a difference to you. I'm wondering whether some of the things I might suggest to you might come as a bit of a surprise. So let's see how that goes. But let me just go through these ideas. It won't cover absolutely everything, and many of you may well have very good ideas as well, based on your own experience, either in high school or here at university so far. All right, so going ahead, let's try and put our heads together and come up with some things that might help us and hopefully make you feel a little bit more relaxed and able to just methodically get your way through this next period. So what is the best way to prepare for these exams and tests that are coming up? Right, well, let's start by just thinking a little bit about how far we have traveled so far this year. Now, there's different ways, of course, we can look at that. Obviously not talking physically how far you've traveled, although some of you have traveled a long way. Others of you have not traveled at all. Actually, you're still sitting at home. You just haven't made it to campus, and that's one of the sadnesses. But how far in terms of time and everything have we traveled? Okay, so, and the next question is, what can we expect to achieve in the remaining time? So that's what I want you to think about. Where have we come from? And realistically, what can we hope to achieve? Okay, so here's a calendar that I have drawn up, which gives us an idea, an answer to that question. Right, so we started our lectures, if you can remember it all, on the 14th of March this year, earlier this year, after you had registered and everything. So you were around or engaging a week or two before that. But that's when we started. And we are now in week number 14 since then. We've gone through March, we've gone through April, we had a vac somewhere in here, then we went through May and through June, and now we've come right to the end of our classes, 17th of June. All right, so then we'll have a few days break, and then the exams will start on the 23rd next week and run for just over 2 weeks. Okay, tests and exams. So why do I do this? Well, I guess it's really to emphasize the need for us to put a bit of perspective on this. So for example, if you have done nothing from day one, you've absolutely done nothing, then I'm afraid I'm going to have to say that the chances of you preparing for your exams adequately in the remaining time are very, very low indeed. Now, I'm hoping that doesn't apply to all of you. But what I'm going to ask you to do as we go along is to try and ask yourself honestly, how much have you done here? And effectively ask yourself, how much have you already prepared for your exam? Because I suspect that a lot of you have done a lot of preparation for your exam already. If you have at least worked somewhat steadily through all of this, and it might be a little bit different in each of your courses, you will have covered some ground and you will have understood some things, you will have learned how to solve some problems, and so on. So back yourself, and it means that that will change the way you think about how you can prepare from here onwards and how you can actually write the exam. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. In other words, the actual exam preparation, what can you do before the exam? And then I'll also come a little bit towards the end to maybe talking a little bit about the tests and exams themselves and little tips and so on about the actual writing of the exam. But most of this is going to be how to spend these next couple of days and weeks in preparation, which will be the best possible preparation for you, and will be done in such a way that it doesn't grind you into the dirt and leave you completely wiped out, okay? And particularly, you don't want to be wiped out before you even start your exam. So how are we going to achieve the right balance between good preparation, but good health as well? So as I said, there's no magical solution, but there's a few things we can think about. So I want to start by I want you to imagine for a moment that you're sometime into next week and you're sitting down to write your first exam. And to imagine, in a sense, close your eyes and imagine sitting down at your desk or wherever it is that you're going to write the exam, a writing table somewhere. And what you would ask yourself when you are suddenly confronted with the exam paper. So this is what you might see in front of you. Okay, you might see a paper which says BSc Honors in Chemistry, Chem 4000W. Here's question 3, a retrosynthetic analysis for aspergillite C. And then you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong exam. Okay, so that was a bit of a joke, I guess. But hopefully you'll get to the right exam. So step number 1, make sure you know which exams you're going to write and where you're going to write them. Double check on that. Okay. But let's just pause for a moment here because, okay, there might be some of you who are going to write, okay, I'm teaching the chemistry honors paper at the moment. This is the 2015 paper, by the way. I'm not this isn't a hot tip for the questions that are coming. But obviously for someone in chemistry, you can immediately see that if they're asking themselves, what should I know by now? Well, obviously, they're going to have to be familiar with all these little squiggles here, which are some sort of symbolic representation in chemistry. So you've got to make sure you understand the language of the subject, right? So ask yourself, do I understand the language of biology, of mathematics, of chemistry, and all of that? You'll then have to spend a bit of time thinking about the actual wording. What am I actually being asked here? It says provide a detailed analysis, retrosynthetic. So, okay, that means I've got to analyze this thing in detail, kind of explain step by step and so on. All right, so all of those will give you hints at what you should have done in preparation. I think that's pretty obvious. Okay, here's a slightly more realistic one for perhaps most of you here. There will maybe one or two from chemistry honors, but a lot of you have done biology this year maybe, or other subjects as well, and you will encounter questions something like this. Question 1, these are requiring short answers. What forms of life are found in deep sea hydrothermal vents and stromatolites, and what clues do they provide about the earliest life forms on Earth? Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details of all of this, but if we step back just slightly, looking at past papers, why do we look at them? Obviously to try and give us an idea of what is coming, the words that are going to be used, what are they actually wanting here? What clues do they provide? Okay, so you're wanting some sort of analysis. First of all, it means you've got to understand what these things are. What are hydrothermal vents? What are vents, for goodness sake? And stromatolites. Okay, so you've got to know those terms found in the deep sea. Okay, I think I know what that means. It means, I know what the sea is and I know what deep means. It's far down, difficult to get to. What forms of life? Okay, what is the definition of life? You know, etc., etc. And then how does that all... So at this stage, all I'm saying is, when imagining you're sitting down in your exam, this gives you a clue to the preparation that you have had to do and the detail in which you had to do it. Okay, so that is somewhat obvious, I'm sure. Okay, so based on those introductory comments, here are a few propositions for you. I'm going to give you just essentially 5 things which I think you must do in order to give yourself a good chance in these coming tests and exams. So, number 1, build on the exam preparation that you have done since day 1. So I've already mentioned that, and I'll come back to that in more detail now. Number 2, have a plan for the next few weeks, starting today. If you haven't got a plan already for how you're going to work over the next week or 2 into the exam period, get a plan together. Think strategically. All right, I'll come back to that in a moment. What do I mean by that? What does it mean to think strategically about the exam? I'll come back to that. Number 4, and these are all kind of related to each other. Identify, and this is partly elaborating on strategically, identify a few things which will make the most difference to your chances of success. And maybe you'll be surprised if you find out what these are. Okay, so maybe you have to accept you cannot do absolutely everything in the time remaining, but if you stop even just for today and think a little bit, can I find the few things which will make the most difference? Is there even one thing which, if I did that properly, would make a huge difference? I mean, this is something which is a very useful thing for us probably in life in general. We can save ourselves a lot of time and energy if we can find the one thing or the 2 things or the 3 things which are going to make the most difference. And then I'll come back to some tips for effective exam writing. Okay, so let me elaborate a little bit on those. So I said build on the exam preparations you've done since day 1. And here I just want to emphasize, be honest. You've got to be honest with yourself. This is you and your being honest with yourself. And then you plan accordingly. So if you know you've not done a huge amount of work, then you've got to accept I'm not going to be able to catch up absolutely everything. And that's where that question, what is the most important thing that I need to do, comes in, or what is the few things that I need to do. If you have managed to keep up and be in touch with your course all the time, that's going to change your plan a little bit, because you won't have to spend as much time on certain things and so on. Okay, so this is quite an important step, actually. Be honest, and then try and we'll then see how that leads into strategic planning, if you like. Okay, so with that, you need to have a plan. So I've now expanded a little bit from where we are, June the 17th, okay? And I've put down here the time remaining. So there's not a lot of time, guys, and this is what I'm trying to emphasize, obviously. We're here on Thursday. We've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then I've just arbitrarily put in fact, the exams that you might have. Exam 1, there should be 2, 3, 4. So make yourself a little plan like that. You've got, put where your exams are, and now you can start planning. Okay, so what is that plan going to look like? Well, it's going to have to try and be realistic and take account of the time available. So, for example, if your last exam is on 7th of July, and you happen to know that whatever that exam is, let's suppose it is biology, for example, and you happen to know that actually biology has been by far your best course all of this year, then if you've got a lot of work to do for the other things, you might then say to yourself, well, look here, I've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I've got 5 days there. I can probably safely leave most of my preparation for those times. Okay, so that's the kind of thing you need to do. Whereas obviously, if your first exam is chemistry, let's say, and you know that you haven't done enough there, then you're going to have to get busy on it straight away, and then calculate what you can do in these various gaps here. So set out an actual timetable if you can. Be realistic, You should not fill every single hour of every day. And I would say divide it into manageable chunks. Even 1 hour at a time, even half an hour at a time is better than nothing at a time. Let me slip in something which many of you will have heard me talk about, that the so-called Pomodoro technique. When you're coming to planning, think of using that cycle of events, which works extremely well. And I've had this from many students, including, by the way, my own children, my own daughters who've been through university, and they've said to me, yeah, it works. So it's not often that they come to you as the dad and they say, actually, what you said was true. Okay. And the way it works is simple. You set aside maybe even just 1 hour at a time. The first half hour, you focus intensely on a bit of the work, and then you deliberately stop after half an hour. You set your alarm clock, you deliberately stop. But during that first half hour, you have no interruptions. You do not allow anything to come in your way. You focus intensely. Then you take a 5-minute break, do something completely different. Then you come back, and for 10 minutes, without looking at your notes, you write down from memory, what did I do? Just scribble it down and try and see if you can organize it as best you can. Put little question marks if you can't remember something. When you finish that 10 minutes without looking, then go back to your notes and fill in those little gaps. Then take another break and then start the cycle over again. And you will be surprised. You can slip in another thing in there if you like, which could be part of your plan. And I'm going to mention this a little bit later again. It's useful if you can link up with somebody else, a study buddy, if you like, or a group of people, and factor in, put a little slot in sometime here during which you get together with those people and you talk about the things that you've done, or you explain it to them. There's no better way to check your own understanding than to explain it. Okay, so just give me a second here while I close the door. Just hold on. Right, back again. Some interruptions. Sorry about that. Okay, so that is all I'll say for the moment about a plan. If any of you guys have questions or something afterwards, or maybe a different way that you've done it that you'd like to share, that would also be fine. Okay, think strategically. What do I mean by that? Well, there's probably thousands of different definitions of this. Here's one definition. What is strategic thinking? It is simply an intentional and rational thought process that focuses on the analysis of critical factors and variables that will influence the long-term success of a business, a team, or an individual, or whatever, like an individual, or in our case, because this is often used in business, but I'm saying in terms of writing exams or anything, this is what it is. You analyze, you think about and you analyze what are the critical factors and the things that I can change and have control on that will influence my success. So it goes back to what I said. Have you been able to identify a few key things? In other words, think smart. Make an honest assessment of how much you've done. Identify the most important things you need to understand and explain. So 2 things you need to identify. The most important things you need to understand and explain in each of your courses, and the most important kinds of problems you need to be able to solve. So this is different in each subject. Obviously, mathematics is different from biology in the way things are expressed and understood, and in the kinds of problems you need to be able to solve. So as you approach each of your subjects, ask yourself these 2 things, okay? Then part of the strategic thinking is then to figure out a good balance in your approach to the work, which will allow you to achieve this based on how much you already know, okay? And find a good balance between working your own and with a study buddy or a group of people. Okay, so this is really what I mean by thinking strategically. Again, it's nothing new, but it's just saying, give a little bit of thought. Spend even a few hours today just thinking, how am I going to approach this? And be smart about it, acknowledging that you may not have time to absolutely do everything, depending on how much you have done. Okay, so that's the third part. Okay, just hang on a second. I'm in the middle of the presentation. Just hold on a minute. Yeah, sorry about that. This is what happens when one works at home, isn't it? As you've probably found out as well. Okay. Then, number 4 that I mentioned earlier on was to identify a few things. So we come back to this business of identifying a few things which will make the most difference to your chances of success. And here I'm going to possibly surprise you, because what I'm going to put to you is the following, that the following 3 things might in fact make the most difference for you. Get enough sleep, try having regular moderate exercise each day, and eat good food. Huh? So I'm saying nothing here about doing your actual work. So let's get that clear. Let's make, so I'm in fact not suggesting that you abandon your work completely. And I don't want you to now go to your lecturers or saying, well, Professor Gammon said all we need to do is sleep and go for exercise and eat good food. Isn't this great? We don't even have to think about it. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that. But I'm saying that if you can balance the process of going through your work and going over it, identifying what you need to understand and how to explain it, and identifying the kinds of problems you need to solve, if you can really balance that with these, it will surprise you what a difference it will make. And I'm going to give you, ask the question here, is there any evidence? Am I just making this up, or is this just like fine sounding things? And you've probably heard them said 1,000 times. So I'm going to ask myself, and I'm going to pass on to you what I believe is in fact good scientific evidence. You are scientists or budding scientists, and there's a lot of evidence that this is actually quite important. Okay, so let's go for it. So if you go to WebMD, which is a good medical website, you'll find articles like this: what lack of sleep does to your mind. Okay, and this is an article by which is just a fairly general article summarizing research. It's been reviewed by a medical doctor, but this is the sort of things that people are saying. You will know yourself that if you are sleep deprived, if you do not have enough sleep, so I'm talking about at least probably 6 hours to 7 hours a night, right? For most people, it varies a little bit. You can then feel, some people describe it as foggy or dull or whatever it is. Here's why. Sleep deprivation leads, in fact, to lower alertness and concentration. It's more difficult to focus, hampers your ability to perform tasks that require logical reasoning or complex thought. Well, you are at UCT doing some complex stuff, and that requires logical reasoning, and lack of sleep deprivation, and there's a lot of research has gone into this, can really affect that. And people have studied the effect of on the brain, and literally nerve connections that make our memories, they're strengthened during sleep. Sleep, in fact, has a sort of therapeutic role in our lives. And if you cut it short, or if you deliberately shorten it all the time, then you start forgetting things, and you lose the ability to focus. It makes learning difficult. It affects your ability to learn. You can't focus. It's more difficult to pick up information, so you can't learn efficiently. It also affects memory, which is of course also essential to learning. And there's evidence in children it can lead to other things as well. So you guys are not children, you've gone beyond that. And of course, critically, I think for many people, and this is very important, it has an impact. So sleepiness or sleep deprivation has an impact on mood and mental health. It can alter your mood. It is, in fact, one of the risk factors for depression. Okay. There are a number of articles which back this up. There's, for example, I picked out an article from 2007 in the journal Neuropsychiatric Disease and Treatment. It's a review of research done on the impact on cognitive performance. That means being able to think, the way your brain works. And again, if you want to look at that, it basically backs up what I've just been saying. Okay, so what about exercise? Well, again, there are numerous research articles on this. I've picked out one in a journal called Frontiers in Psychology. So I'm not just, I mean, obviously I had to select one or two here, but these are representative of a fairly widespread agreement on this. Effects of physical exercise on cognitive functioning and well-being. So again, let me just say to you, I'm not advocating that you suddenly go out in a burst of, running marathons once every day or whatever. That's not what I'm suggesting. There are a lot of benefits to even moderate exercise, going for a walk, getting out, having a bit of a break. Okay, and here's an interesting chart from that, which summarizes from the research. This is and a lot of citations are given to research. And they differentiate between chronic aerobic exercise. In other words, this is where you are doing regular, moderate, or even high intensity over a period of time. Now, if you do that, there's a lot of evidence for it positively affecting your brain, improving cognitive function, especially memory and executive functions, counteracting neurodegeneration, and so on, general well-being, and decreasing anxiety and depression. So I think Bongi in her introduction mentioned that we're all feeling a little bit stressed and anxious. Well, there are some, of course, sometimes these conditions are serious, and I don't want to trivialize them. And I'm not suggesting that if you're really undergoing serious bouts of stress or anxiety or depression, that this is going to suddenly cure you. But what we should take note of is that there are benefits in this kind of thing, even in what's called acute aerobic exercise. In other words, if you've not really been exercising much, but you decide, okay, from today onwards, I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk each day. Okay, moderate to high intensity, and it does affect it. It improves your mood and so on. There is a small improvement in cognitive function. So that is something that is worth thinking about incorporating into your daily routine, is all that I'm suggesting. And I'm kind of suggesting that if you do these things, each of them, particularly if you combine them into a balanced way, that it will have a surprising effect and begin to counteract some of those really anxious feelings that we get, and will help to balance ourselves. So we are all human, and I share and I understand the feelings that you feel. I also get anxious, actually. I really do. I've suffered from anxiety a lot myself, both when I was a student and even in my working life. It's something that is almost, it's common to a lot of us, but there are ways of us managing it, at least to some extent, fairly simply. That particular article goes into a lot of detail, which I'm not going to go through, but it focuses on the actual biological effects which have been measured if in people who do exercise, and so there are actual changes in the brain that can be detected. But there are also psychological hypotheses to explain the fact that people feel better. It enhances well-being. It enhances competency and self-efficacy. Competency, the ability to do things well and properly, and self-efficacy, that's your sense of self-worth, and that you feel as if you're actually achieving something. And there's lots of evidence that PE, physical exercise, enhances cognitive functions, the ability to think and manipulate ideas and thoughts in younger and older adults. So I'm going to put you guys more or less in this category here. And there's lots of research evidence for this. So we're not just making this up. Okay, then the final one is food. And okay, you're not going to be able to change your diet in the next couple of days, but I'm going to suggest, I picked up a few interesting thoughts from, this is from one of the Nature journals, reputable journals, Science of Food. It's not Nature itself, but it's one of in that group of journals. And basically what they're saying here is that there's evidence that an unhealthy diet, so for example, if you read here, an unhealthy diet, high in saturated fat or high in sugar, triggers neuroinflammatory processes. And that suggests, in other words, that it's not just if you are obese, that you are overweight and so on, that you can suffer inflammation of parts of the brain. But even if you have short-term consumption, so what I'm suggesting to you here is it's tempting over the exam period to kind of deteriorate into snacking a lot on junk food, basically, and not pay attention to what you're eating. And there is a small risk. I'm not trying to alarm you here. You're not going to become zombies if you do this. But there is a small risk that you are contributing by way of the various biochemical processes that happen, if that is your food that you're ingesting, to inflammation, actual swelling of parts of the brain, which then lead to spatial memory and contextual and spatial memory impairments. It actually affects the way that you think and your mood and your anxiety. All right, so we need to keep all of these things in perspective. And what I'm really just saying to you is the following. I don't think it's a time for you to make huge changes to your lifestyle and everything. So be careful, I think, with this. But if you pay some attention to each of these factors, make sure you sleep well, that you have some exercise and some relaxation built into your day, and that you eat as well as you can under the circumstances, then you are giving yourself a, because if you are, as an alternative, if you work yourself to the bone, just thinking, I've got to get this thing done, I'm fallen behind, and you work 18 hours a day and you end up only sleeping 3 or 4 hours because I want to get up early so I can get back to that. And especially as we build up to the exams, all that you are doing is you are dulling your brain capacity to actually do the best you can. And you're doing yourself a disservice. It's not a fair reflection of what you can do, actually. If you do your work effectively, even if you don't do quite as much as you'd hope to do, but you balance it by these things, you will recover at ability to be sharp in the exams and tests and to be careful and strategic when you're writing them. So I hope those thoughts might be, it might be just something for you to think about. I don't want to, as I said, it's up to you guys. Need to take this information, do it, work with what you think will work for you. Okay, so let's assume that you've done all of those things. You've gone back over your work, you've identified the key things that you need to understand, you've gone over the problems, and you've focused, I guess, perhaps what I should have said is, of course, you can go back over past papers to see what kind of exam questions are going to be set. That is helpful. Don't rely on that only. Go through your tutorial questions and what you have done in the lectures and in the tutorials in particular, because that is going to be an indicator of how you need to know this work. So if necessary, go back over your tutorial questions, make sure you understand them, seek help if you need it. All right, so you come to the exam. What do we need to do? So there's many things we could say here, of course. And, I could suggest that you take your favorite teddy bear into the exam with you, that you find another way in which you could feel relaxed. There's things like, even simple things like breathing to help you feel more relaxed, which does help, I think. Just kind of deep breathing, careful in inhaling and exhaling as you settle yourself in. All of those things, I'm not going to go over them. Each of you might have your own little tip on how to do that. But here's a couple of things you should look at. So read the question carefully, make sure you understand what is required, check your answers. Okay, I want to illustrate this by going back to that biology question paper that I gave you earlier on. Okay, so this was an example from the biology, and I could have taken it from any of the other subjects that you're doing. Obviously, the details will be slightly different, but this, I think, will just illustrate what I'm trying to say here. So read the questions carefully. Okay, so it literally starts by looking at the headings here. Part 2, short answer questions. Okay, good. So they want short answers, not like huge long essays. And that is the clue to that, the number of marks being assigned. You can more or less guess that if 4 marks are assigned to a question, they want at least 4 distinct points, well argued, well substantiated. Okay, so there are clues here to what is required. Okay, there's no negative marking. In this particular paper, there was a multiple choice section. I assume they might have had negative marking. They sometimes give you write complete sentences. Okay, so even though it's short answers, they don't want you to write in point form. Okay, so if it says that, write complete sentences, then for goodness sake, try and do that. Don't then say, oh, that means bullet form. It doesn't. And, while it won't be wrong, if you're following the instructions, it sends a nice little message to the examiner. The examiner looks at it and says, ha, this person actually followed the instructions, and puts the examiner in a good mood, even if they've eaten bad food that morning. All right, try and work tidily, obviously. This is hard in an exam because you're under a bit of pressure and so on, but give a little bit of thought to that. Okay, this one went as far as saying illegible or untidy work will be ignored. Well, having examined papers myself, I know that if things are really totally messy so that you cannot understand it at all, then you are, then you have to eventually ignore it. You can't spend too much time on it. Okay, so look at the things quickly, but then pay attention to what the wording is. Here's a question which says explain. Explain the link between. Okay, so even before you know what's coming, you think to yourself, okay, I've got to give an explanation here, and there's got to be a link. There's got to be one idea, one concept, and then another concept, and then what is connecting them. All right. And so you must make sure in your answer that you have got those components, because if the examiner does not see the two concepts explained or defined, Mendel's law and meiosis, and then does not see any attempt to make a link between them, then you're not going to get any marks. So by trying to make sure that your answer fits the way it is being posed, the question is being posed. That is the important thing here. Okay, here's another question. Why do sex-linked genes exhibit unique patterns of inheritance? Okay, so there's got to be an explanation here. And clearly the sort of thing that's being required is to start off by, well, making sure you understand these concepts, and then maybe providing a little concise explanation or a little definition of each of these, because you can't explain why until you have clarified the meaning of each of these. So obviously, depending on the subject and the level at which you're at, you will go into more or less detail, but make sure that your why answer gives a clear indication of your understanding of the terms themselves. Patterns of inheritance, unique patterns of inheritance. What does that mean? Unique means like they're only found in one place or in one way. They're not found in a whole lot of different ones. What are genes? What are sex-linked genes? And so on. Okay, so we could go on here, and those of you who are doing biology will make more sense of this, but even without me necessarily understanding the actual content here, I can kind of see what they're asking about. They're presenting a concept or an idea or two or three ideas and asking you to explain them, to give a logical sequence of things from one step to the next. Okay, I mentioned if I can just go back here, as I can't, okay. I said in the previous slide that you need to read and understand the question carefully. You know, there's nothing worse than heading down a long answer and then realizing at the end of it, actually, you've answered the wrong thing. Or that you've written too much and that it's just 4 marks. And so you need to be concise, to the point, nicely connected and logical. If necessary, scribble a little bit of an outline on the side so that you can then get the thing in the good order, a logical order, where one point follows on from the previous one. One point follows on from the previous one. From an examiner's point of view, this helps a huge amount, let me tell you. If the examiner can see that there's a logic, there's a flow in your question, even if it's a little bit messy and so on, but it's clear that you're saying, okay, first of all, you must understand this, then from that, from A, you get to B, and then explain B, and then from B, you get to C, and so that explains it. That is enormous help. Okay, so I mentioned in that previous slide the importance of checking your answers well. Now, obviously, if you're under a lot of pressure and you don't have time to check well, then you can't. I'm thinking now probably of more questions which involve calculations and everything. So there's two ways in which you can think about checking when you're actually in the exam. The one is once you have got your answer, so you've been asked to calculate something and you come up with the final answer. Obviously, it's important, and many of you will know this, to immediately say to yourself, does this answer make sense? You know, does it make sense? If it's a numerical answer, is it in the right sort of what we call the ballpark? You know, is it the right order of magnitude? If your answer is 98, you know, then there's a difference, a significant difference between that and 980, an order of magnitude difference. So if you know that the answer has got to be round about 100, and you know, does that make sense? You know, that's where you can just check. The other way, of course, to check is in a more detailed way, go back through the logical steps. And as you all know, it's very easy to make little slip-ups in the course of writing an exam under pressure. All right, so I hope that those are some details. Thank you very much. There are some ideas that you can work with. I'm going to just get out of this now and go back into this. I hope I'm still with you. I think so, yes. So Bongi, I think I'm going to stop there. I've given some ideas, and I'm obviously very happy to answer some questions or however you'd like to see things going from here.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. I'd like that everyone who has a question, you raise your hand and then I'll note you, and then you ask your question. Then Professor will answer your question. Yes, Alex, you can go ahead.
Hello, Professor Gammon.
Yes, hello.
If you know that you will be short on time, or at least that you always run out of time, but you've missed the deadline to get a time extension, what can you do in the exam to ensure that that is minimized?
Yeah, okay, good question. So Bongi, shall I just go ahead and answer one at a time? That's fine by me.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so Alex, yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, if you've got a problem that you feel is kind of a longer term problem, you'll need to go through the process of applying for extra time and so on. But if you haven't done that yet, yeah, it probably comes back to, again, this idea of strategic thinking. You've got to try and figure out a way of working within your, let's call them limitations, if you like, or what you know are your own limitations. You need to be honest about it. I know I'm not going to have enough time here. You know, what am I going to do about this? And so that's part of that honest self-assessment that you need to go through. You know, I guess an obvious way to do this is to spend a bit of time at the beginning of the exam or test and just try and go through and prioritize which questions you're going to answer. Because if you know you're going to run out of time, then it would be better for you to concentrate on the questions that you know you can do, rather than waste time on the ones where you're not so sure. So at least get those out of the way first, where you know you go through your thing, maybe just put a little asterisk or something next to the questions that you say to yourself, okay, yeah, I think I know how to do that one, or I'm pretty sure of it. Let me do that first. And you go right through and you just identify the questions that you're going to do first. I really think that that's probably going to be the best strategy for you if you know you're going to be under a little bit of pressure. And then just be confident in that, so that you know that even if you don't actually have time to get to some of the questions, you know you will do well in the ones that you've got. So Alex, I don't know if that helps. You know, again, there isn't a kind of magical solution to this, and it comes back to this, what I've been saying, which is we all have to kind of think smart in this process. and not just go sort of blind into the exam and just sort of think, oh, whatever, let's just see what happens. Rather give it a bit of thought. And I guess as a general idea, it doesn't even matter if you're someone who doesn't, who struggles a bit with the timing. In general, it's quite a good idea to spend time looking through the paper. Many courses provide an actual time for that, a 10-minute reading time or whatever. And that's the value of it, that you can go through and decide. You do not have to do question 1 first and then question 2 and then question 3. You can do it in whichever order that you want. And it's worth just spending a bit of time figuring that out. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor. Jodine, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Go ahead.
I just want to ask, is it possible that for first years we'll have to scan pictures of our exam scripts instead of actually hand in our physical scripts?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. In fact, I hadn't really talked very much about those sort of practical things. And so if there are other questions around that, we can try and answer them. So I know the precise answer to that question. Based on our experience last year, I'm assuming you're in your first year, are you, Jordan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So based on, because obviously last year we went through some of the process, and certainly in many cases, students were required to do that. Yeah, to scan and then to upload. And a lot of people manage to do that just with their cell phones. Either you just take a photograph or you can get, scanning apps which allow you to save it as a PDF as well. So you can either take, so for example, some courses required students to write down a question. I mean, chemistry is a good example where you need to write out chemical structures, or maths where you write out a formula and so on. And then you simply take a photograph or a scan and then load it up, which is possible through Vula. So what you'll need to do, I would suggest, if you're unsure about it, send an email to your course convener and ask them just to clarify that. That's a perfectly legitimate question to ask at this stage. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the answer is that I would guess that it is likely, if you're doing an online exam, that you will have to do something like that. Yes.
Even for exams in person?
Oh, I see. Well, you're talking about exams in person. Oh, sorry. No. Exams in person, you wouldn't have to. No, sorry, I misunderstood you there. Yeah, no, exams in person, you would write everything on the page. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Samgeli, see where your hand was up. I don't know if you still have a question. All right.
I still have a question.
Brianna. You can.
Can I go for it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just want to know where can I find the recording for this meeting, or will it be available? Like,
Bongi, I don't know who started the recording, but whoever did would get a notification of that, and then that can be circulated, presumably. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So it will be made available. It'll be circulated. I'm guessing. How will you do that, Bongi? Through the. I mean, we can put it on the Science Faculty Vula site, if you like. You can send it to me if you want to do that, or if you have another way of circulating it, we'll make sure that everyone can.
Oh, yes, that would be lovely. We're planning on sharing it on the Vula site, but that would be lovely.
Okay. Yeah. So if you're a registered science student, you'll get it.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Bongi, I see that there's a question that's been put in the chat. Shall I quickly deal with that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Kinu Naika asks, how do you recommend being mentally prepared for exams being a second-year student, since we've not written exams as yet, because the campus environment can be more stressful than the comfort of one's own home? That's a good point. Yeah, so I'm aware of that. Obviously, for students who were in first year last year, they ended up not writing exams in physically, as it were. And so this would be your first exams. Look, it's hard to perhaps suggest exactly. I mean, I think maybe let me have a bash at a few comments here. First of all, I maybe just to reassure you, I think don't worry too much. The exam venues are not too scary. And I suppose it'll be a bit like when you wrote your matric exams, probably, or the exams at school. I think that if you really have got anxiety about that, you can, I'd suggest maybe send me an email. I mean, there is provision in some instances for people to have separate venues, but that's, you really have to have a pretty well documented reason for that. I would perhaps suggest that you contact your course convener and just say to them, you know, look, you're a little bit uncertain, and maybe even if you could just chat to them beforehand, or the invigilator, and if you want to just be reassured about it. What we know so far is that, and in fact, the regulations may well have in fact changed. As you all know, we've now gone to level 3, which means that there will not be a huge number of students in the exam venues. And in some ways, that's, I think, a good thing. You'll be well spaced out. And it will make it possible for you also to communicate quite easily with your invigilator. So I would say that if you feel uncomfortable or you know, uneasy or something, just simply ask to speak briefly to the invigilator, and I'm sure that they will assist you. You know, what you need to try and do is, I suppose, just draw on your own strength and resilience, and the fact that this will be similar to exams that you've written in the past, because I think most people have done, you know, everyone who's come through school has done it, and the exams are really not that much different than that. You know, you'll be given papers will be handed out. The exam atmosphere will be somewhat similar to your and the way the exam is actually conducted, probably very similar to the rules and regulations which were in place for matric exams. So you tend to have a main invigilator together with 1 or 2 other assistant invigilators, quite often postgraduate students who are assisting, and they will hand out the papers, they will give you instructions, they will tell you any specific things that you need to know about. They're normally done, in fact, I'd say they're less formal than the matric exams. You know, the lecturers tend to be quite informal about it, and they know that, you know, that I think they know that you're feeling a little uneasy and so on. So I know that I'm not being terribly specific, but I hope that helps a little bit, maybe anyway, Kinu. Maybe there are a couple of other questions. Alex asks, will headphones, earphones not plugged into any device be permitted? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think you're going to need to ask your invigilator. The key thing, if I'm not mistaken there, is that clearly they will be wanting to be reassured that you're not listening in to some advisor of yours who's somewhere else and remotely beaming in answers to your questions, which of course is fairly unlikely. But I think take them with you and ask them. I mean, you know, and if you can simply show, look, these are not connected to anything. It's not a Bluetooth thing where you're communicating with someone else. Or if you can take simple earplugs or something, which clearly, you know, that should be absolutely fine. So I'm not aware of any specific regulations which say that you can't have them, but I'm pretty sure you will have to sort of declare it to the invigilator, and I think it should be a fairly straightforward process. Okay. Right, let me just go through the things. So Luke says, thank you. Where are we able to access past papers? Okay. You should be able to get some past papers, I think, from the Vula sites of your course. And if not, I think you need to ask your course convener or the class rep to find out where your particular exam papers will be located. I think it will differ from course to course. How much time would you leave for checking answers? Yeah, that's going to depend a little bit on just how pressured the exam is. I mean, ideally, I suppose, in a 2-hour exam, I would certainly, the last 10 minutes or so, I would leave for that. You know, so if you can aim to try and finish 10, 15 minutes before the actual time of the exam, it's worth, you'll often find you can go back and do some worthwhile checking. And then I see, Danny, you've asked about the process of the exams. Yes, to elaborate a bit. Okay, that's a good point, because again, something I hadn't really thought about, that for those of you who've not been in exam. Yeah, the way our UCT exams work, I've said a little bit about them so far, about the invigilators and so on. But typically, you will come into the exam venue. It could be a lecture theatre, or it could be something like the sports hall. And there will be tables or the lecture benches set out. And there will be, it will be very clear where you can sit and where you can't sit. So there will be, for example, exam writing books in certain places and not in other places. Very often, as you come into the venue, they will hand you a random number, which will then assign you to a particular place to sit. So that is quite common. So that it's just a random seating and you're not allowed to just sit anywhere. You have to sit where you're directed to sit. And then typically you will have an exam writing book there and any other writing, you know, graph paper or whatever else the exam requires. And then there will be an attendance slip, which you will be required to fill in. You need to take your student card in with you. And if you don't have that yet, you check on the UCT website. There are ways that you can get that. You can request it in advance and then pick it up at the office itself. If you do not have a card for whatever reason, or if you forget it, you must have some form of ID with you. And then the invigilators will simply take note. And then you have, if they can verify, if they know who you are and they can verify that you're part of the course, they will do that. You might, in some instances, have to submit your ID or your student card at a later stage. The attendance slip, you put your name and your student number on there, and you record the number of the position that you're sitting at. So if you're sitting at desk number 37, you write that on there. And so that forms part of the record in case there are any appeals or anything that happens afterwards. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the invigilators will read out initially the formal instructions. They're pretty normal things, you know, make sure you do your own work. And then they will set the clock going, as it were, and then they will give you warnings at certain times about how much time is left. And then at the end, they will tell you to stop writing and then to simply sit and wait. And obviously, you need to write your name and student number very clearly on the exam book itself and make sure that those details are correctly recorded. And then they will collect the exam papers. And once they've collected all of them, they will dismiss the group. So I think that's pretty much in it. Yes, Deanie reminds me the course code. Make sure that you on the attendance slip and on your exam book, you need to write your name and student number very clearly, and also what the exam is, Chem 1000W, paper 1, or whatever it is, and the date on which it's written, so that you know, in case these things go astray, or you know, it's obviously very important. And if the examiner finds a book with no writing on it, no name on it, obviously that's potentially a very tricky situation. Okay, yeah, someone asked how early should we arrive at the venue? Look, I would suggest that you arrive at least half an hour before the exam, at least. Okay, there will be obviously checks, COVID-related things and so on. So I would say even 3/4 of an hour beforehand, but certainly not later than half an hour beforehand. They will probably start letting you into the exam venue about 15 minutes before the writing time, depending on how big the group is. But 30 minutes before should be adequate. But allow yourself a bit of extra time in terms of traveling and that sort of thing. Just make sure. Make sure you've got, your pens and whatever you need, how to take a spare pen, all of those kind of things with you. The different venues will have different arrangements for your bags. Some of them will direct you to where you can leave your bag, and it will be in a secure place, but you won't be able to take it with you to the desk. Some venues might even say, look, take it and then put it under your desk or something like that. Varies a little bit. Obviously, cell phones, you will be required to switch those off. And obviously, it's a very serious thing if you in any way look at your cell phone during the thing, so don't be tempted. Yeah, okay, that's another good question. Deanie mentions long time since she's written an exam, not 100%, but are you allowed to leave once you're done writing? Or is it just tests? Yes, you are allowed to leave. So if it's a 3-hour exam and at the end of 20 minutes you're done, because you know the work so well that you've written it all down, no, then you certainly can. The rule, if I remember clearly, is that I think it's either half an hour or 20 minutes before the end. You are not allowed to leave within that last half hour or 20 minutes, whatever it is. The instructions will be given to you, actually. It's one of the things that they read out to you. So in the period, so if you finish, half an hour or 20, I think it might be 20 minutes before the end, then you will not be allowed to leave. You have to wait until the end. And that is simply to prevent the possibility of a whole lot of people towards the end suddenly starting to get up one at a time, and it becomes very disruptive. So bear that in mind. But otherwise, yes, you can leave when you've finished. And certainly that if you finish early, make sure you check before you actually leave. Okay, so those are some of the other questions that have come in. Bongi, I don't know if there are any other things that have come up. Yeah, someone said about parking being an issue. I'm not sure about that, but that's why I'm suggesting to you, certainly for your first exam, I would say just take extra precautions, arrive at least 3/4 of an hour beforehand, make sure you leave good traveling time. Obviously, you put yourself under pressure if you rush in at the last minute and you're disorganized. Good. I hope everyone's feeling better now. Bongi, do you think so? Do you get a vibe from what's going on here? Is everyone suddenly feeling a lot happier?
I think so. I think people are feeling better now, and probably they have an idea of how they're going to approach exams now. Yeah, I think this was really helpful.
Sorry, maybe just to add, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you will bring this session to a close soon, but if anyone does have any other questions that they are wondering about, you're welcome to email me or whatever. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor. I'd like to
ask that the slides that you were using today, may you please also share those with us.
Yes, of course. You'd like me to send you copies of the slides?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Who shall I sort of send them to you?
I'm having fun.
All right, Bongi, I will send them, I'll email them to you.
I think it will be better now. I was having sound issues. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. I didn't hear what you said. After I asked that you share with us the slides that you were using.
I will send you the copy of the slides.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I think this is the end of our meeting, and I believe it was really helpful. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and happy studying. Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome, and all the best to you all. Hope it goes well.
Thank you.